Good afternoon, everybody. So for the next 45 minutes, I get to have some fun with three pretty distinct people. I'd like to welcome Alex McIntosh, Joel Heath, and Dave Kingsbury to the stage, please. Yeah, thank you. So the skills that we've been talking about all day, the ones that we find critical to great adventure and that are truly at the heart of most successful businesses and investments: adaptability, resilience, fortitude, teamwork, optimism, transforming adversity into opportunity. Those skill sets that require out-of-the-box thinking, we wanted to have an opportunity for these guys to share some of their incredible stories about tenacity and what truly taking a company to scale, to have that initiative around a brand, that's the thread that unites everybody up on this stage today. So I just want to take a minute, one by one, to go down the row. Introduce yourself, a little bit about your background in regards to entrepreneurship.
Okay, we'll be very quick. Dave Kingsbury from Boulder, Colorado, and my background is primarily market research, and I had a small company in Boulder 10 years ago that was purchased by a global ad agency. Very interesting journey. And have sort of done like 3 startups at this point. Now doing a very nicely funded startup. You've seen some of the next stuff outside. I'm with New Hope Natural Media, and we're building basically an accelerator and tools to help entrepreneurs in natural, healthy, organic products accelerate their businesses. So, brief. Cool.
Hi, my name is Alex McIntosh. I'm from San Francisco. This is my second CBIS, and it's great to be back. And I do want to thank Alyssa. Where is she? Is she in here? Yeah. It's remarkable. I feel like in some genetic way she's related to all of us because she seems to be connecting everyone here. And for me, the greatest experience so far is just last night. We were able to have dinner and she kind of stitched us all together. So I want to thank you for bringing us all together. So I've spent about 20 years working at the intersection between business and the environment. First, when it didn't really make a lot of sense to do that, and I'm not sure I did the best job of it, and then later as it became more and more understood how those two things fit together. And I've done it on the nonprofit side with the Nature Conservancy, where I was running some really inspiring projects, part of some really inspiring projects related to water. I've done it on the corporate side for one of the biggest companies in the world, Nestle, their water division, and I was building out a very large sustainability program for them. And then I left that to start an impact investment fund, which has invested in a few water companies and also has brought to life a company that we'll talk a little bit more about today called Thrive, that came into market last year, and I'm really excited about that. That's probably the most innovative thing that I've been part of. So the scar tissue on my body relates to all 3 of those ventures and being in both the private and the nonprofit worlds. And I think it's probably made me a better investor and a better entrepreneur as a result.
Thanks, Alex. My name is Joel Heath. I've been 20 years with lifestyle brands. Had a company out of Colorado, Untraditional Marketing, for those first 10 years, built the largest outdoor adventure event in the country. Most recently was president of Teva Footwear, you might know as Teva, mispronounced by 98% of the world. I ran the Teva brand for Deckers Outdoor Corporation since 2009, and most recently in the middle of a startup that I'll be announcing in October. So I have a flight at 3 o'clock, so I'll be stepping off the stage promptly at 2. So.
What you don't know is we locked that door, so I don't know if we're going to be able to.
I'm really going surfing.
Thank you for joining us for this next 45 minutes. We do appreciate it. So you kind of get a sense that none of the panelists have taken the safe route when it comes to adventuring at scale and what it really looks like to grow a sustainable business. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit and I'll direct a question either at one of you or all of you and then open it up for an opportunity for folks to ask questions in the audience. So, Alex, you ready?
I'm ready.
It's like Trivial Pursuit, isn't it? This one's for you. So I'm kind of curious as I was taking notes here. You've pioneered models of sustainability and corporate responsibility in the for-profit and nonprofit sector. That's kind of a unique blend. Nestle, the Nature Conservancy, and now EcoMundi and Thrive, which you mentioned, which I want to hear a little bit more about. So how have you identified and developed opportunities to scale sustainability? Because that's a very big question for both sides of a very large fence.
Yeah. So the scaling of sustainability, I didn't really know what the hell I was doing at first, and I was lucky because when I was a young kid, I took a job at the Nature Conservancy. And the theme that will run, I guess the short answer to your question is a really inspiring vision will bring great people together, and more often than not, you'll do most of what you need to do right if you've got that vision there. My first interaction with a really inspiring vision was something that I didn't develop at all, but I was very lucky. I'd left a corporate job in Manhattan. I went up to Maine. My job was to raise money for some inspiring projects we were doing. And about 3 months after I got up there, the leadership purchased what was, at the time, the largest project the Nature Conservancy had ever done anywhere in the world, the most expensive by a factor of 2. They basically bought the last wild river that was left in the eastern US, and they bought almost the whole thing. And then there was this really interesting horse trading that went on between our nonprofit and these huge timber companies to get the rest of the river. And it was an inspiring project, and my job as a really young kid was to lead a team and help us figure out how we were going to pay for that. And it was really expensive, and it was very stressful. But the vision was so inspiring, and the people that we worked with were just unbelievable, both at the nonprofit, but also investors that were coming in as philanthropists, other companies and government officials. And so for me, what I got to watch at a really young age, while I was making some mistakes that were pretty tough to make when you're young, with my team and with the way I structured things, we built out this incredible result where we protected this unbelievable river. And what was really satisfying to me was to be part of this vision that was so much bigger than, we knew we were part of history as it was happening because it was so big and it was so risky, and it worked. And it didn't work out exactly the way we thought from the very beginning. Someone asked a question, I think, in one of the earlier panels about how different is the outcome from what you intended. It was pretty close here, but there were some dark days. And I think for me, being part of that, Luis, that vision that sort of pulled everything together was so impactful to me early on. And so then for my next iteration, when I went to Nestle Waters, Nestle Waters is the biggest bottled water, it's the biggest consumer water company in the world. And they have all kinds of issues they had and they have around plastic, around water rights, around working with stakeholders and communities. And my job there was to figure out how we could be not only a better company, but a much better force for good. And I think what I learned from the Nature Conservancy days was that vision that can really be inspiring and pull people together, even people that are outside of your organization, is magnetic. And so my gift there was I was given great resources within one of the largest companies of the world that I had to earn over time by buy-in, but that vision really helped pull everyone together. And so by the time I left Nestle Waters, to wrap this up around the vision, by the time I left, what was really neat for me was to start this new company, the one Thrive, with a vision that is just so remarkable and so beautiful, and it's pulled people together from a number of different countries. And so when I think about scale, you can start a great idea by yourself. You definitely cannot scale anything by yourself. And I think Steve Jobs is often pointed to as this incredible entrepreneur, and he was. But part of the reason he was so damn good is he attracted unbelievably talented people that were willing to put up with all of his crap because his vision was so inspiring. And I really think at the end of the day, that is what great change comes from, is a great vision that pulls people together. So, in a long-winded way, that's the answer to your question.
Fantastic. They mentioned that we all had dinner last night, and I got to say it's one of the more memorable meals of my life, sitting talking to these three exceptional individuals. So Joel, before we lose you to that big busy flight, we talked a lot about the outdoor industry last night and about the fact that, and I'll use my words here, being a bunch of crazies and a really hard industry to peg down. And your success within that industry in a very shifting environment, what have you found to be the most effective in models you use to innovate within that crazy changing landscape? And then the second part to that question is, how have you overcome some of the inherent challenges within those shifting industry models to deepen that engagement that you really need in an industry like that?
That's a good question. You know, I've been part of a company that was $1 million. I've been a part of a company that was 100 million, and now I'm at 0. And I got to tell you, the 0 to 1 million has got to be the hardest. So I have empathy for us all in here. You know, one of the things, the models that I've fallen back on quite a bit is a model of 70-20-10, where despite where you are, long-term sustainability is the thing that we all need to do. And in that 70% model, there's a dedication of 70% of your resources to the core business, what's happening now, and making sure that you're taking care of your core and you're delivering the core. It helps you deliver the number to Wall Street. It helps you deliver the number to your investors and yourself. But the extension, the 20% investment is critical as well, where you're looking for the new. What's the adjacent categories that you can go from footwear to apparel, or from one category to another category? It's what your consumer would expect you to do. But it's really hard to remember that, because you're stuck in the 70% so often of the time. You're trying to survive and you're trying to make that number, but that critical investment of the 20% into the adjacent categories, in my opinion, allows you to sustain for 3 to 5 years. But in that final 10%, which is what I would call transformational investment, is where the Googles have become great, and they're not just a search engine. That 10% allows you to invest in innovation, and throughout my companies, I've always required a protection of that 10% with a different ROI analysis for that 10%. And ultimately, the research, and this was in an article in Harvard Business Review, I think May of 2012 or 13, they talked about the ROI of the 70-20-10 model and the inverse proportion that you'll see from the 10% investment. But it has to be protected, because when you're surviving, when you're in a startup mode, you're thinking about, I got to launch this product. But from 10 years from now, you need to be a different company than you are today, because the world's going to change. And so that innovation portfolio is critical for us as an organization. It's critical as a culture, and personally, I think it's critical in how we live our lives. And one of the things that was defining for me is I find that I like to fall in the 10%, and I'm not sure, I would guess most of the room is in here, where you want to be on the front end of innovation. And so you're sitting there, you got to look at your organization and your culture and make sure you balance out to make sure you're protecting the 70 and the 20. And to look at Teva, for a brand that a lot of us know, you could argue that Teva totally fell asleep at the wheel, not on innovation, but on the core business. We forgot that we needed to own the sandal business. And so you had a product like King come on and just kick our butt, frankly, because we were trying to so hard go into innovation in closed-toe footwear things that we forgot our core business. And so the last 24 months that I was there, we were really investing in the core business of getting sandal market share back so that we could take care of the now and then innovate over a longer period of time. And that's been critical for small or big companies that I've been a part of.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dave?
Sir.
Putting the new back in New Hope, like we talked about outside. You know, given your experience working with high growth brands, nationally and globally, I was kind of interested in what trends you see driving that growth to get sustainability to scale. Because from a brand perspective, there's a difference between high growth and really sustaining that growth. So I'm wondering what you've seen out there in the marketplace that really works.
That's a hard question. I think that there's a couple of thoughts that brings to mind. I mean, the most interesting part, and I know from rough math, I'd say like at least half of this room is somehow associated with the natural products industry or health and wellness or sustainability. What's so fascinating, you know, like with the announcement of General Mills purchasing Annie's on Tuesday, I think that was. I think the natural products industry is a microcosm of culture as a whole, if you will. I mean, natural products have always been on the front end, and then things always follow. For 30 years, my parents have told me I'm weird, and we're fringe, we live in Boulder, we live in the bubble, and then 2 weeks ago, my 78-year-old dad said, well, your mother and I are doing a cleanse. And I like that my dad can spell cleanse. I mean, I'm kind of shocked. I think there's an awareness in food and in business that the way we put it is the hippies are getting out their wallets and people are starting to pay attention. I was down at Walmart a couple years ago meeting with some of their buyers about products in the natural category and what are they going to do with natural, and this is way before the Wild Oats announcement and all that kind of stuff. And the woman in the meeting, you know, we're under this giant generic room with a huge mural of Sam Walton, and she goes, you know, you weeds and seeds people, I mean, you're a rounding error. Right? And so I said, okay, and this is before marijuana was legal in Colorado, okay? So I was like, well, if we're a rounding error, why are we in your like special meeting place in Bentonville, Arkansas? Because, you know, there's got to be something here. So to hopefully circle back, I think the Walmarts and the General Mills, and we work with all the giant CPG brands, and we work with the entrepreneurs. And the tension, like what we used to talk about in the ad world, is you got to out the tension in whatever cultural question you're asking, whether it's launching Mini in the US when, you know, that sort of started the SUV backlash, or whether it's, you know, the job, part of the job of advertising is to put a wedge in there and make people think. But that, how do the General Mills and the Kellogg's and the Cokes, how do these giant companies move into a more sustainable place, a more responsible place? Oh, by the way, that maybe it keeps their consumer alive for a little longer so they consume more of their product over the long term, right? And I think sustainability and is a really tough word, like it was said well this morning. Resilience, it's a tough word. Sustainability means a lot of things. The definition of sustainability is the ability to endure. So literally, it's what you said. Like, what are we doing? It's not just the hippies in Boulder that are going, what can I do so my grandchildren have a little bit better world? It's the conservative MBAs in Illinois and in places where you wouldn't find that. So I don't have the answer, but there's that shift in awareness, and I think that's why there's this kind of energy in a room like this today, honestly.
Fantastic. Weeds and Seeds. I'm going to remember that one. That's
yeah, Weeds and Seeds. I like that one.
I've never heard that one before. That's pretty good. So, in the course of the event last night, we started a conversation that I'm sure a lot of you have had, maybe centering around vacations, maybe centering around something that happened. That conversation around that, no kidding, or another choice word, there I was. And then after that, you sort of filled in the blank about adventure, taking a risk, having some out-of-the-box thinking. Last night, we were talking about rivers in Costa Rica and adventures in Colorado and adventures on Mount Whitney and all kinds of things like that. Now, this might feel like a little bit of a left turn, but if you bear with me, it'll stick to this theme around adventure and really trying to step out in front of all the things that you've just been talking about in your professional side. So what I want to ask, and all of you can answer, or hopefully one of you will answer this. What's the greatest adventure you've ever had?
You talking business or personal or both?
Pick. It's up to you. Personal or professional.
Why don't you leave with that?
You want me to lead with that?
You leave with that.
Okay. This is a reasonably good story. Okay.
After Weeds and Seeds, I don't know if you can top it. But
So after I had this research firm in Boulder, we got bought by Global Agency of the Decade, Crispin Porter Bogusky. Alex Bogusky was on the cover of Fast Company. We could do no wrong. We won Microsoft, right? Which is a plus and a minus if you've worked with Microsoft. And I had a Jerry Maguire moment, and I resigned. So this was, I'd sold a company I had an interest in. I was in this super hot upcoming ad company that was just on fire. I mean, we went from 120 to 600 people in like 18 months. And so Alex had said, he had been to Paris and ridden the bike share system in Paris and said, let's get one of those in Boulder. That'd be really cool, right? And so I did some research and looked at it, and I sent him my Jerry Maguire like 10:30 one night. Dude, I'm quitting. I'm going to create bike sharing in the US. I'm a bike advocate, a passionate commuter, and I was like, the time is now. This is what I was put on earth to do. So Alex, in his infinite wisdom, forwarded that to all the partners who didn't know me. I'd only worked there about 7 months, and they're like, who is this nut job, right? And I like had the Jerry Maguire moment the next morning too, and he's like trying to pull this stuff out of the mailboxes. I'm like, I had to unsend the email. Who do you go? The cut to, as our Hollywood friends say, we started a company called B-Cycle, which is now the largest bike sharing system in the US. We're in 17 cities. It's a nonprofit. I'm on the board. But that, I mean, literally, if you looked at it professionally, like I had kind of gotten to whatever zenith, some pretty good success. And then it was just like, that Bill Gates, that stuff, no thanks. I don't want to do that. So that was a big, oh blank moment, but it actually ended up being so far one of the coolest things I've ever worked on in my life. So it's like that, and that was gut. All that was gut.
Awesome. That's fantastic. We're going to call that your nut job moment, or your Jerry Maguire moment. That's good. Guys, you have a story to share?
Yeah, my mom had this quote, I can't remember who it's by, on our computer screen. It said, the most dangerous place to view the world is right here, right in front of that screen. And I think that's true in business as well, and that's a philosophy that I think we all need to adapt, is we have this 2-week vacation mentality so much in America that you have to hang your hat that for these 2 weeks I will define who I am. And whatever that relative adventure is, a cruise or climbing Everest. And the reality is that when there isn't separation between work and life, that's where adventure is lived the most. And so my belief is that you have to move to have that adventure throughout the world that we have. And so my moments have always come away from a computer screen. It's where the best ideas that get shot down later, but always come on. But when you have that runner's high, or you're in the lineup of the surf or skiing the back bowls, to me that's where the moments come, and how we change the culture of organizations to be able to adapt to that, and that it's not how long you're sitting at your desk that defines your success. It's your output, and output can come anywhere, and it can come at the highest places in Earth, and that's where I believe truly companies are defined. And those are the moments into our life that we need to protect, not 2 weeks of vacation. So Yvonne Chenard said it well, right? Let your people go surf. So
That's great. Anything to share?
What we already established last night, these guys both have much more adventuresome adventures than I have lately. That's why I wanted you both to lead. And you should definitely follow up afterwards, because they've got a lot of good recommendations on crazy things to get involved with. But I want to actually follow, the way I would answer your question, Louise, is by sort of following on Joel's theme. I think one of the things, I'll put my entrepreneur hat on, I think one of the things that the entrepreneurs in the room will find is something that's pretty common for humanity, which is a lot of times it's a small moment within the adventure that's actually the most meaningful thing, right? It's not necessarily the minute you've hit the summit, although that's exhilarating, and I loved your presentation this morning. I was transfixed by the whole thing. But there's often a small moment that's not at the peak of the summit that really defines for you what that experience was. And I think we can all relate to that, both as entrepreneurs and as people. The one I'll share, the one-liner is being chased by a pack of wild dogs in Costa Rica. And that was the adventurous part of a really shitty day that ended up being the most beautiful moment that I probably had in the last 3 years. We outran the dogs. Just that was key. But what it was so the company that I started up with a few others about a year ago, Thrive. One of the theses that we're trying to prove is that a company can aim for something much more inspiring than being sustainable. I've spent most of my life working on sustainability, and I think it's certainly better than the alternative, which is doing nothing. But I think it's a really uninspiring end goal. And it's been dumbed down a lot. And so we were looking to go way beyond that. And part of that is in this company, Thrive, is a regenerative supply chain. So it's actually a positive footprint that we're building in intentionally from the beginning with the sourcing of our materials, is to have a positive footprint. And so we were down in Costa Rica with my team, and we were tramping around all of these farms trying to find the places we'd start this. And I thought I had been really freaking clear about what the criteria were and the types of farms we needed to see. And we went down there, and it was just like one horse show after another. Nothing fit. It was like the Goldilocks moment. And the penultimate moment, and I had not slept for like a day and a half because I'd had a bunch of fundraising meetings. I'd flown overnight to Costa Rica. We'd been tramping around in the Caribbean side, which is really hot and humid and buggy. And this pack of wild dogs came out of this farmhouse and started chasing us down a road. And that's when I looked and I said, I'm 45, this is what I've signed up for. Like, what in God's name have I done? This is the worst thing that's ever happened. And we outran the dogs. We had some very big sticks, and we outran the dogs. And we finally got to this small little farm, which wasn't perfect, but it was really good. And one of my team members, who's this very esteemed ethnobotanist, he's probably one of the most famous in the world, he's a Costa Rican. And he turned to the farmer, and he was explaining, in his words, not just Spanish, but in his words, what this idea was. And he was telling the farmer that we were going to work with him to restore his land and what that would mean. And the way he described it, it was this person, my team member's idea, and it was at that moment, probably because I was exhausted and we'd been chased by dogs, that I actually got like a little choked up. And it's that moment that every entrepreneur knows when your idea is no longer your idea. It's an idea that belongs to a larger group of people, and it's the most beautiful moment. And so, for me, that was probably one of the greatest adventures, was this crappy, hot, humid day, killed by mosquitoes, almost eaten by dogs, and then one of my team members explaining something that to me was so profound and so small, and that was, for me, that moment in the adventure that I'll never forget.
Fantastic. I hear a clear theme from all three of you. It's that connection of who you are with what you do in that moment. Very, very powerful stuff. So before we lose Joel, I want to ask one question that lives on the other side of that coin. Not everything goes right all the time, as we know, and we discussed a little bit last night. There is always those lessons to learn from gnawing on the burnt crust of failure. So what I want to ask all of you, are there any lessons that you've gleaned from when things don't go right and don't go well that remain consistent with you regardless of what you're facing or what you do?
Yeah, it's cliche, but the best gifts in the world aren't bows, don't have bows on them. And what you learn in business today in a failure is just, it's what you're going to learn in the future, and it's going to be that much better. So how you define failure is the biggest challenge, and how you respond to it, I think, is what defines you as a company and you as a leader and as a culture, most importantly. And if the culture is there, failure can't happen, in my opinion. But I think that's a Jordanism, if you will. But that's where I have. I mean, it's those darkest moments that you're sitting in bed. It's always 3 a.m. I don't know, for me.
2:48.
2:48. Around 3 to 4 a.m. is just where companies are made or broken, just in your own head. And it's really not as bad usually when you wake up and allow some perspective and just take it in and roll with it. And the resiliency conversation was critical because you have to have it.
That's good. Guys, have anything to add?
Do you want to escape under the subterfuge?
You could
of
thumb
stories?
wrestle
Yeah,
if you
5
want
more
to.
minutes.
You want to go? Or you want me to
No, go ahead.
So I'll go back to the bike sharing thing, and we were in this really pivotal time of, and it was an odd thing because we weren't an agency in this sense of the word. We own the patents on the technology within the bike share system. We designed all the products. We designed the racks. We did everything from scratch. And I have this tendency to get really, really hurt before big things. I haven't figured it out yet.
Could be ride 100 miles a week, maybe.
Right, I'm riding to work, and I'm just kind of spacing out. We had this huge kind of pivotal meeting with an engineering group and finance people, and at this point we had gotten Trek bikes, you've probably heard of, involved, and Humana Healthcare involved, and I crashed. And I stood up, holding my elbow, and I'm like, ah! And it was like, this was in August, and I was like, why am I standing in a puddle? And I won't go into a lot of detail, but I had basically like an arterial bleed up in the back of my leg. So I did what you do, I stuffed it with clothing, and I rode to the hospital. And I'm texting, I'm literally laying there, and people are like, where the hell are you? And Alex was not a person that got mad twice. And he's like, Alex is furious, you're leading this meeting, and I'm literally like this, texting, like, no, don't, no. And so 2.5 hours later, after they sewed up my calf muscle, we won't go into that, I come into the agency on crutches, and people are like, you're done. Like, B-Cycle's dead, whole thing's dead, you're fired. And I hobbled my crutches up to Alex's lair, and his assistant, who's a really great lady, who helps me out a lot, she's like, go away. Like, he's just not in the right place. So I hobble in, and I sit down, and he's doing this really obnoxious thing where his laptop's open and he won't look over it. And I'm like, yo, hey. And he just folds the screen and he goes, show me the scar. And I'm like, what? So we spent 20 minutes unwrapping my leg, looking at all the stitches and all this stuff. And moral of the story is, that's the day. This is exactly what you're saying. That is the day that project that was its 999th death, and it didn't die. And it went, I mean, and from that point on, it was great. But like, I could have just not gone to work and believed I was fired or believed it was dead. And I just said, dude, whatever, you know, if you fire me, I'll go do this somewhere else, but just tell me it's dead. So it's just like, I love that thing. I didn't really realize that was that moment in this process until I listened to your dog story.
That's great.
Cool.
Thank you. Still have the scar? Some people might
I
want to
have
see
a
it.
pretty good
after
scar. I'll
the show.
share it after.
For anybody that's interested after we're done, feel free to ask. Anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I think they covered it great.
That's pretty good. I would agree. So before we do lose Joel, we're kind of running short on time here. I want to kind of open it up because we have a collection of all three of them, and as you can see, they seem to take great joy in feeding off of one another. I want to open it up to any questions anyone may have for these guys. And I know we have a microphone up front. And I think there's a microphone running around the room.
We were told that our main goal was to keep everyone awake after lunch. So if there are no questions, we haven't done our job.
It's working. I'll keep going if nobody helped. There we go.
What river on the East Coast did you say?
It's called the St. John River. Have you been on it?
No.
It's an amazing, it flows north for like 60 miles, and then it becomes the northern border between Canada and the U.S., then it flows back out to the Atlantic. And you can canoe on that river for almost 9 days without seeing a human settlement or a street light or hearing a car. It's an amazing place.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I see a tenacious, tentative hand over here. And Joel, anytime you want to go, we'll just spend the rest of the 10 minutes talking about you, so feel free to...
This one's actually for you, Joel, real quick.
Oh,
Sorry.
there you go. Perfect timing.
Ian Silverberg, longtime listener, first-time caller. You mentioned the 70-20-10, which I think is brilliant. I'm curious if you believe that it should remain in those same proportions, even from very startup all the way to the very end, or if how do you prioritize that if you're really in bootstrap mode?
You bet. Not my theory, first of all. I mean, Google was the first to bring it to the table, and a lot of people have. So at least the academic approach it is going to fluctuate. And when you're in a startup mode, you're heavy on the innovation side. But my personal belief in the model is that you have to maintain your day in a 70-20-10, despite where your cycle is within the business. Because if you are sitting in your inbox, you're 100% in the 70%, and you're not going to have a company in the next couple of years, in my belief. So yes, there's fluctuation within the organization and how your business plan, but you need to maintain the balance and the awareness, most importantly, and the protection of the resource to be able to make sure that those three buckets are alive and well at the correct balance for your time. For Teva, you know, in my last 18 months there, I was pulling us drastically back into the 70% because we needed to dominate sandals again, but we needed to maintain the innovation for the sense of our culture, because we all of a sudden went from attracting a lot of talent that was loving making crazy shoes, but all of a sudden we were in the sandal business, and even just for the cultural aspect, the innovation in that model was really important for us. Great question.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for joining us as well. I know you need to take off. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Joel as he takes off. I'm not done with you guys yet. You guys get to hang out for a little bit longer if that's okay. Okay? All right.
I'm wondering who's getting axed next.
Well, I don't know. Anybody have a question out there in the audience? Yep, you've got a hand right there.
Dave, I heard a statistic a little while ago that I have no idea if it's true or not, and you'd be the person to ask, that there have been like no accidents from those sharing bicycles. Is that true? This is kind of a weird question.
There are some. So there's a formula, right? So the big thing when City Bike went in New York was they were putting. Does anybody know the numbers? Anybody from New York? What's the number of bikes? It was 42 million. I remember we bid it. We didn't get the bid, but it's 10,000 bikes. 12,000 bikes, right? So the non-alternative transportation aficionados in New York City were saying, you're going to dump 12,000 inexperienced cyclists on the streets of New York. They're going to get it mowed down like babies, right? The the thing that with bike share is the more awareness people have of, the more bikes people see, the more they become aware of them, and the more they drive consciously towards bicycles. So it's all chicken egg. So literally, the more bikes you have, the safer it is, because then people file them in their head as valid public transportation. So I don't know. I can ask some of the directors around the country about accident stats, but I have not heard significant issues with that, which is odd because the whole helmet thing with bike share is very controversial. So you don't have to wear a helmet. You get the bikes out of the kiosk. There is no helmet. So are you encouraging people to ride without a helmet? Like, no, you should always ride with a helmet. But yeah, I don't think, and even New York was under so much scrutiny when that went in that I think if there had been any big incidents, we would have heard for sure.
Great question. Anybody else?
Yeah, so just one comment. I have a dear friend of mine, investment banker. She never, ever would get on a bike. And Hurricane Sandy hit, and she called me one day. She was like, "Oh my God, Rebecca, I rode a bike to Wall Street." And I was like, "Great, good for you." And she said, "There were 14,000 people out there with me." And then she said, "And you know what? In New York, there's the green light and the red light. There's a green light and a red light for bikes too." Yep. And it was amazing because all of a sudden riding a bike was really legitimate. So thank you for your bike share. The question I have for both of you, and it comes a little bit to the 70-20-10, both of you are in, I would say, first mover categories. Like bike sharing didn't exist and all of a sudden it's in the US because of you. I'm thinking about your regenerative business. So you have how do you create a positive footprint? And the question I have for you is, as you build your organizations and scale them, you're having these aha moments that create spaces. What are you doing for other people that let them either contribute to that or have those aha moments themselves? Because I think about all the work we have to do, we've got to have a lot of first mover moments like what you've had. I'm just curious about what you do in your teams to help support that.
I don't know it's a great question, and I don't know how helpful my answer is going to be, because the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that is, a lot of times I don't know what the hell to do. I know where I want us to go, but I don't know how we do it. And I've been really lucky with some of the people, and again, this is why some of the companies here will raise money and will succeed and will prosper, because the founders have gotten around them enough talent and experience to answer that question of not only how can we do this which everyone else is doing and win, but how do we go past that? And I think it takes really, really exceptional people that can answer those questions. And a lot of times I don't know what the hell to do. I just know where we need to go. And fortunately, the team that I've been able to pull together has taught me and has sometimes surprised themselves by figuring it out. So what's an example? One of the challenges so the products that Thrive sells, it's a shaving and skincare line. We started with guys, but it turns out that a lot of women are buying this. And what I told my formulator when we were starting, I'm very passionate about female entrepreneurship as a side note. And so we ran this contest in Costa Rica for 6 months, which is where our products are coming from, to find a great female entrepreneur to join our team. And so we tracked down 18 companies that were run by women who were making some type of body care or natural care product. 11 of them entered, 3 of them were finalists, and the one that won is just fantastic. And I said to her, the expectation that the general world has is this stuff is going to cost more and it's going to not really work that well compared to the stuff they would buy in Walgreens. And so we got to go way past that. And our price point can't be more than 10 to 12, 15% higher than what we're going to be competing with in the conventional care market. And you've got to use these 2 plants that have never been used in the market before but are safe. And we've got to figure out how we can build a supply chain getting this out of Costa Rica. And I didn't know how we would do all of those things. And she and the rest of the team figured it out. So I think a lot of times the role of the founder or the entrepreneur is to help get the team looking at something that is beyond what they thought was possible. And then if those people are good and they're really bought into it, they'll figure it out. And so that would be my answer to your question.
Thank you.
A brief addendum. So this next trend business that's about a year old within our organization, New Hope, New Hope is a bit of a juggernaut from a business perspective. It's a very successful 40-year-old evergreen revenue stream, and our shows are sold out for the next 5 years. So it's like pretty good business, right? So we said we want to actually, a bunch of us who are very passionate about the natural products industry and the entrepreneurial side of things said, let's leverage all these assets we have with these giant things, and let's make tools for the little guys. And let's make tools for the investors, and let's literally open up a toolbox instead of be the Chamber of Commerce. Let's get in there and help with the plumbing and the electrical and the GCing and such. So from a financial perspective, we're pretty meaningless today, and we are private equity owned. And our pitch, and what I've tried to do, so one thing we did to directly answer your question is we physically moved in our building. So gave up the corner office, moved into the basement, literally, because we wanted to be separate, if you will, because we wanted to have a different mentality. So now our business is still not financially meaningful in a huge way, but my belief is that over the next 2 to 5 years, some of the people who have been sort of scrutinizing us a bit heavily are going to go, wow, we never knew it could go this far. And look at what this is doing for the rest of our business. So in order to scale off a beast, right, I felt like we had to kind of go over here in our corner and like work out a bunch till we got big enough to like even matter. And that, even just that physical separation. And then one other thing is, our parent company is a $500 million media company, and it's quite conservative. And the CEO of our parent company has this big joke with me. He yells at me whenever he sees me, put on some shoes, because I'm usually not wearing shoes. And this doesn't matter if we're in Manhattan or Santa Barbara. People need to not be scared, right? And they're like, the CEO just yelled at you. I'm like, so what? It's about my shoes, whatever. And so like, how can you give people the license to be a little bit more themselves, to bring themselves to work? So what Joel said, let's not go automatron. We have kids, we have dogs, we have passions, we have life. By allowing that to exist in a workplace, I think you get so much more out of people from a productivity standpoint, but you also, they become more vested in the work, and they're there as whole people, not as the accountant or the lawyer or the whatever. So trying to make space for that, I think, is important.
That's fantastic.
I like that a lot.
So in the final minutes we have remaining, one quick final question for the both of you. What do you wish somebody would have told you when you started all of this?
Oh, you go first. I'm going to steal yours.
Okay. Well, everyone says this, but you don't listen, which is, it's a marathon, not a sprint, bringing a company to life. And until you've done it a few times, even on the investor side, I mean, you see that, and you can tell when your entrepreneurs are burning out, or they're not making good decisions, or they're not coming to the board meetings like fully themselves. But it's amazing. I was talking with a few of my friends that I've known for a few years here, and because of this, and because of Alyssa. And when you succeed, so the people that are raising money, you raise the money, and then what happens? Then your problem is, how do you use it well, and how do you grow, and how do you keep your investors aligned, right? And when you start growing, the challenge is, how do you provide for good products consistently to your customers over time? And I think that one of the toughest things that I just did not understand until I actually left large organizations and started something of my own is how you really have to pace yourself. And I'll just say personally, for me, it was really rewarding to be with these guys last night, because like everyone in this room, I like having fun. Like, I like going to cool places, I like doing cool things, I'm very active. And I was sitting with these guys last night, and I felt like, oh my God, I feel like Dilbert sitting next to them, like sitting in a cube, because I've just been like this for the last year and a half bringing this to life. And I mean, we were just talking about how he gets to work, which is in itself an epic, I mean, you would have like acronyms for it or something, right?
Yeah,
what do you call them?
It's called the Canute.
And what's the other one?
Scanute.
The Scanute. So these are things you can ask about. So the best piece of advice that I think I had heard but I didn't really understand was be in it for the long run and make sure that you or the person that really cares about you is watching your batteries. Because in the end, you will be a much better person and a much better leader if those batteries are mostly charged most of the time. You're going to have times when you run it down, but I just didn't pay enough attention to that, and I think it got me a bit in a hole, and fortunately, I was reminded of that last night.
There you go.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Dave?
What was the question?
One-
I got so into your story, man. I'm like, I
This
had
is kind
my,
of the way it went last night,
Yeah,
too.
this is how
It's
it went
really
last
great. What's the one thing you wish somebody would have told you when you started all of this?
Yeah, so I'll be simple, and I'll call out my 8-year-old with his quote at the end of this. But like 1993 was loving where I was working at this publishing company, pre-internet. And my sister calls me from New York, and she says, "Oh, I just saw this thing in the Wall Street Journal that you sold your company to Condé Nast." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" Right? And I was on my way to swim practice at like 5:45 in the morning. I have this neurotic policy of keeping a lot of sports equipment in my car, just in case a meeting cancels or like something happens. So I went to the office, and my sister faxed me the article, and I waited by the front door of our office for our owner. And I had the article, and he walked in, I put it in front of him, I said, "Dude, am I snowboarding or working today? Just let me know." So long story, we got bought by Peterson Publishing, the car and driver, guns and ammo guy, and total chaos. Total chaos. They laid 28 people off within 24 hours. People are flailing. And for some reason, this just incredible sense of calm overcame me. I had to interview with them on like an hour's notice, and I was totally unshaven and did not have anything, even like dress clothes like this.
Shoes?
I had to borrow my friend's suit.
Do you have shoes?
And it was like one of these things. So I went into this interview with this new company looking like, I'd gained 50 pounds in the last, but. So the motto, the thing I wish somebody told me, and then I'll quote my son, is, it's gonna work out. Like, it's gonna work out, and sometimes just taking 10 deep breaths or whatever. And so last week, we're downhill mountain biking at Winter Park for my son's 8th birthday, and I just bought this great camera. And so psyched about this camera, because I take tons and tons of photos, and I spent a lot of money on this camera. Had on me, and we get up to the top, and we start our first run down, and I go, "Quinn, let me get up to that jump, because it has a motor drive, and I can do all this cool stuff." And I felt for my camera, and I was like, "Oh my God, like, where is my camera?" And I started really losing it. And my wife, we've been together 20 years, she's just like, "Lose it, I don't care." And we did the run. We get on the chair, and I'm just brooding. And my 8-year-old goes, "Dad, what's more important, your camera or having a great day at downhilling with your son?" So it's all going to work out. We found the camera on the next run. Like, literally, it had bounced up and was like sitting on a stump in plain daylight. The odds of us finding that camera were 0.02%. So it all works out.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Alex and Dave. If you have any follow-up questions for these guys, I'm sure they'll be around.